how our 6.5-year-old French bulldog Daisy died within 15 days from what started as an ear infection. I know a lot of our followers already loved and knew Daisy and know a little bit of this story, but I'm going to start from scratch for those who don't. Daisy was actually my parents' dog. My mum and dad had 3 French bulldogs. I've got 2, one of which is Daisy's brother. And apart from skin allergies, Daisy was very healthy. She'd never had any illnesses or any sickness before. With her allergies, she was under the vet. She would go to the vet quite often. She was on medication, injections to keep it all at bay. This also meant regular cleaning at home, which included her ears. She would often get sore ears, get ear infections, but on this occasion, she was itching at her ears a little bit, but nothing out of the ordinary. Usually when it's getting sore, you'll see her tilting her head, or she'll be itching it like way more than usual, which she wasn't. So on the 7th of June, my parents went to Wales to a caravan with the dogs. Now, usually of a morning, Daisy's the first away. My dad woke just before 7 o'clock and Daisy hadn't woken him, so he went into the dogs and they were just all in their bed. So he decided to take them straight out. Now, Daisy didn't want to go, but Daisy sometimes does that. She doesn't fancy going out with them. So he took the other dogs out, and usually Daisy would go straight to the door where my mum is in the bedroom and scratch at the door to get it up. But this time she didn't, so my mum got up because she thought it was a bit strange and Daisy was still in the bed. And when she called Daisy, she walked to her and immediately fell over. She did get herself back up and she seemed okay, just a little bit strange. With Daisy's insurance that she's got, there's an option to have an online vet call. So my mum booked one in. And when they had the call with the vet online, the vet asked to see Daisy, asked to see her walk, looked at her eyes and noticed that her eyes were shaking slightly. At this point, she said that Daisy needed to go to a vet because it seemed like she had an ear infection and it had got really bad and developed into something called vestibular disease. So they called a local vet, but unfortunately they were just about to close and they said they could go to an out-of-hours one, which was about 50 minutes away. So they made the decision then to go back home to the vet where Daisy was known. They went to the vet appointment back at home and they looked at Daisy. They said her ears didn't seem too bad, but there was a slight infection there. But they couldn't see any further than that. So they thought it could be this vestibular disease with the shaking of her eyes. They gave her antibiotics and drops and sent her home. The antibiotics did seem to work a little bit for Daisy. She was getting a little bit better, but not enough. Daisy's a big jumper and she wasn't jumping at all. When you would come into the room, she would usually be first to greet you and she just wasn't. She wasn't really falling much, but you could tell she just wasn't herself. So they went back to the vet the following week and they said that they would book her in to get her ears cleaned properly under anaesthetic. So on the 14th of June, she went back into the vet to get her ears cleaned out. When they went to collect Daisy later that evening, they said that there wasn't too much infection in their ear, which was quite strange. However, she did have 2 perforated eardrums and also another condition which I can't pronounce. I will put it on screen, but basically it's like cysts in the ear and it is quite common in French bulldogs. The only way they said they could confirm this would be a CT scan. But they said even if it was that, the antibiotics could clear it up completely and she might not need surgery. So she was sent home with more antibiotics. And as soon as she got home, she had like a spring in her step. She was bouncing about. The following day, it was like nothing had happened. She was bouncing around as normal. Now, unfortunately, this was short-lived and she seemed to decline a little bit over the next couple of days. So the following Thursday, the 20th of June, she went back to the vets and they said they wanted to try out with a special steroid wash for her ears and continue the antibiotics. So she went home that evening, she continued with her antibiotics and she had the steroid wash just before bed. And unfortunately at this point, Daisy began to decline rapidly. After the ear wash, Daisy was just staring up at the ceiling and he thought it just felt a little bit strange. He went to bed and the next morning my mum got up about 5 a.m. and Daisy wouldn't move out of the bed. And when she took her outside, she fell over and she couldn't get back up at all. When she did get her back up, she immediately fell back over. She was like far worse than what she'd been. My mum immediately called my dad. He came down and they brought her back in and she just lay in the bed. Daisy then just stayed in the bed and as soon as the vet opened, my mum and dad went straight to the vet but left Daisy at home. They didn't want to take her out unless they could see her. The vet said that the wash could have irritated her ears and not to use it anymore, but to bring her in later that afternoon and he would have a proper look at her. But he thought that she needed to go for a scan at that point. So they said, yeah, of course, that's what we need to do. My mum had already contacted me at this point and me and Bertie, my dog, we made our way to Liverpool where they live. Daisy hadn't really eaten that morning, but when I got there, I tried to give her some of her food, but her head was just in an upwards position and it was like she couldn't bring it down at all. So I was hand feeding her and she seemed to take her food that way. Looking at her, I knew that something was very wrong and this wasn't just an ear infection at this point. Daisy didn't seem to be able to put her head down and her eyes were shaking and it didn't seem like she could properly see me from her left eye. She couldn't sleep because she couldn't put her head down. It must have been really uncomfortable for her when she put her head down. So I managed to settle her, laying on me, and she did manage to get some sleep. And despite her being so ill, she still wanted to go into the garden for a little sunbathe. Later that afternoon, we took her to the vet. He checked her over and he said she definitely needs to be referred for a scan. And they referred us to a vet called Northwest Specialists. So this was Friday afternoon. We got home and within a couple of hours, the Northwest Specialists had called my mum and they offered her an appointment, which was over 2 weeks away. Now, at this point, my mum said to the receptionist, there's no way that she can last like that. She can't sleep, she can't drink water. We were syringing water into her mouth at this point because she couldn't put her head down to drink. And they didn't realise how bad she was. So this was just the receptionist who got the referral. She said, let me go away and speak to the medical team, show them the notes, and I will get back to you. Once she'd spoken to the specialist, she called straight back and said, no, this is an emergency case. We'll see you first thing in the morning at 9 a.m. So then we just needed to get Daisy through the night until the next morning. So again, I hand fed her. She ate, I'd say, 80% of her meal. And we said that we would give her some more food later on because she wasn't to eat after 9 or 10 p.m. that evening because she was going to have a general anaesthetic for her scan. But within the next few hours, Daisy took a turn for the worst and unfortunately she had a seizure. This is not something that I've ever experienced before and it was absolutely horrific. So on the Friday evening before Daisy was due to go for her appointment with the specialist on the Saturday morning, she was in her bed sleeping and my mum heard a noise and looked over and her legs were out stiff. I ran straight to her and I knew immediately what was happening. Her eyes were bulging out of her head. She was stiff as a board. Her all four legs were stuck out in the air, she couldn't move them, but she was kind of shaking and rocking. Now, my mum's the biggest panicker ever, so I knew that we needed to be as calm as possible for Daisy. My dad had also followed over behind me. So I was just trying to calm Daisy and said, I think she's having a seizure. And my mum immediately started screaming. I was like, no, stop. We need to be calm. This needs to be calm for Daisy. So I put my hand in her mouth to make sure that she hadn't swallowed her tongue or she wasn't going to. She was like this for a couple of minutes. I was just calming her down and she was getting really hot. She started to pant then. So we put a cooling towel on her and I took her out into the garden onto the grass because the grass was cool. I don't know how I stayed so calm, but I think it's just because I knew that's what Daisy needed. So on the grass, I lay her down and she kind of come out of the seizure by then, but she was definitely not back to normal. The other dogs didn't come anywhere near. They absolutely knew what was happening. I asked my dad to get me my phone and I called the vets. I had them on loudspeaker. I went through to the out of hours and I explained what had happened. And even though Daisy was out of a seizure at this point, she was still quite stiff. Her eyes were still quite bulgy. So I was just checking in her mouth to make sure that she didn't go back into a seizure and didn't swallow her tongue or choke on anything. The vet asked a lot of questions and said that it was best for us not to take her in unless she had another seizure that was much worse, because taking her out of a home environment into the vet could trigger another seizure. They told us to keep her in a cool, dark room and to call back immediately if she had a much worse seizure at any point during the night. So then I took her upstairs and I lay on the bed with her, closed the curtains so it was nice and dark, and we put the fan on and kept her cooling towel on her, and she did calm down quite a lot. We'd already made the decision I was going to stay with my parents that night and Daisy was going to sleep in the bed with me and Bertie. But after the seizure, we didn't want to risk her falling off the bed, so we put out the sofa bed, which is really low to the ground, in the spare room, and we put it in there, again with her cooling towel, the fan. And I remember saying to her at the time, it's just 12 hours left, Daisy, and we will be leaving and going to the specialist. That's all we've got. She did manage to settle for a while, and then at about 10:30, the panting started. And again, her paws, they spread out like this. Her legs were straight out in front of her and she started to have another seizure. Her first one had lasted, I think, roughly about 5 minutes. but this one lasted maybe about 45 seconds before she started to come out of it. Again, I just put my hand in her mouth to make sure she didn't swallow her tongue, kept her cool, kept her calm, let her know that we were there, and just waited for her to come out of it naturally. Within 5 to 10 minutes, it happened again, but this time it was only about 15 seconds before she came out of it and calmed down. It was at this point that I thought, if this happens again, or it gets worse, we're going to have to take her to the vet. We can't keep her at home like this. Fortunately, she didn't. She slept right the way through. I was just checking on her throughout the night. She moved once, like just gone 3:15. I moved and put her head on my arm and then went straight back to sleep until early the next morning. The next morning, once the other dogs had gone out for a walk and it was just Bertie in, we took her out downstairs and put her out to go to the toilet, and she literally couldn't stand at all. She fell like not just onto her side, completely onto her back. And every time we stood her up, she would go a step and then just fall straight back over again. She then went over to like where the bin was outside, and she was just like rocking back and forth. I picked her back up, took her back up to the bedroom, and she slept until we left. We got to the specialist before it opened, and we just sat in the car and waited until her appointment at 9 a.m. My mum went inside to wait for when they were ready for her, and then came out so we could take her straight in. She didn't have to wait. When we took Daisy in to see the specialist, she was in my arms, and again, her head was up. So I explained straight away that this is the way she'd been. She had to have her head elevated. And immediately she was concerned and wanted to take a look at Daisy's eyes while she was in my arms to see if she could continue with the consultation or whether she needed to be taken straight over to theatre. But her eyes were responding, so she went through with her checks. She went through everything with us, took all the information, and then she stood Daisy on the table, which she was able to do, and she done a lot of testing on her eyes. And in my first or second part of the video, I'd mentioned about the fact I thought Daisy couldn't see me with her left eye, and she explained the reason for this. She said she didn't think Daisy's muscles on her left-hand side were working, so when she tapped at the side of her eye, she couldn't do anything about it, but her eye was responding to light. She just physically couldn't move her eyes, so it was like me trying to blink but not being able to. So after doing her test, she said she thought there was definitely a problem with Daisy's brain, and the only way to determine what that was would be to do an MRI scan. At this point, she thought it could be one of two things, one of which was inflammation of her brain, and secondly, a brain infection. Her guess at this point was that it was inflammation of her brain. When we heard that she had a problem with her brain, even though I already knew in the back of my mind, it was horrible. But when she explained it to us, it felt like it was the better option rather than the cysts in her ear. Simply because the surgery for the cysts, they would have to take away part of Daisy's face. And with this, she explained that it could be treated with medication. So if it was inflammation of the brain, she said it would be able to be treated with steroids. But if it was the brain infection, it would be strong antibiotics. But at this point, she didn't think it was going to be a brain infection, simply because brain infections are usually common in hotter countries where they're really hot and wet. She explained that she was going to take fluid from her spine, fluid from her brain, do the MRI scan. She was going to look at it, but then she was going to send them off for further analysis. Of course, with any dog, there's risks going under general anaesthetic. She did explain that the risks were much greater for Daisy because of how poorly her brain was. She also explained that she may not be able to get the fluid from her spine and her brain. She wouldn't be able to tell until Daisy was under general anaesthetic. She said it wouldn't take long to do, and because of how poorly Daisy was, they wanted to get her started straight away. So we took her over to the other building, which is where the hospital was, and they got her prepped while she came back and went through a quick few more details with us and got us to sign her consent form. She did explain that she was hoping it was going to be really clear from the MRI results and the fluid that she took from her brain and spine as to what was wrong, and she would be able to treat her straight away. She was also going to send them off to a specialist in the field to get their opinion, but she was hoping that with the results she got, she would be able to start treatment straight away. And then once the expert in the field came back to her, they might be able to tailor the antibiotics or the treatment around that. She did also say if it was inflammation of the brain, which was most likely at this point, that a course of chemotherapy might be needed to suppress Daisy's immune system, because if that was the case, the inflammation of the brain would have been caused from Daisy's own immune system attacking her brain. And she did say this could be quite common in the hair breed in French bulldogs. So we left Daisy there. We went home and we were actually quite hopeful. I think because we thought it could be treated with medication, it was going to be much better and she wouldn't need surgery, and we were going to get our Daisy back. She said depending on the results, we might be able to take her home, or they might need to keep her in just to get the medication into her system. Early afternoon, we got a call and she said they were unable to get the fluid from Daisy's brain and spine. However, from the results of the MRI, her brain was inflamed. However, it seemed more likely to be an infection. But that infection wasn't what she initially thought. It was actually an infection from her ear, which she said was very uncommon. She said Daisy seemed a little happier when she woke up from her anaesthetic, which was really positive. But because they were unable to take that fluid from her spine and her brain, they were unable to give a specific antibiotic, and they had to just give a broad spectrum antibiotic to treat her. She was in ICU and they wanted to keep her in overnight to make sure that everything was okay. The results had been sent off to the specialist, but they'd not yet had a response from them. And she said they would contact us the next day once they had a response. I must say the care and the way that everything was explained to us in Northwest specialists was unbelievable. The neurology specialist that we dealt with was absolutely outstanding. She explained that she was at home but on call throughout the night, so if Daisy needed her at any point, they would call her and she would go straight in. Daisy was on 24-hour care. She was never left alone. So we knew she was in good hands. I did call up twice before I went to bed that evening to see how she was. She hadn't eaten, but she'd gone out to go to the toilet on her own, and she seemed to be in a good place. After our last call to the specialist team at Northwest Specialists, we went to bed and we were all really hopeful. We were talking about how we couldn't wait to get Daisy back the next day, and my mum was cooking her a Sunday roast dinner, and we just wanted to get her home. We had given my number as the primary number, so before I went to sleep I made sure my phone was on as loud as it could be. And I just had this feeling that I was going to get a call in the night. 8 minutes past 2 on the Sunday morning, my phone started to ring, and it was a withheld number. And I just knew straight away. It was the neurology specialist herself. And this call is something that keeps going round in my head. And I just can't get it out of my head, this phone call. So when I answered, she said that she'd had a call from the team, and Daisy had unfortunately had another seizure, but she hadn't come out of it. She said she was very, very poorly. She'd instructed the team there to give her a certain medication, which is the medication that she gave her during the MRI scan. And the medication was to basically calm her brain, I think. But even with that, she wasn't responding, and it was only something that could be given short term. This was a 4-minute phone call, and I can't remember everything that she was saying to me. The one thing that I can remember, and the one thing that keeps going over in my head, is she said a number of times, my concern is that Daisy is going to die. And she was going through things that she was going to do, but she kept coming back to, my concern is that Daisy is going to die. And I think the only response I gave was, can we please come and see her? And she said, yeah. And I was like, can we come now? And she was like, yeah, I would go there straight away. She said that she was on her way, and the distance in between from where she was probably around about the same from where we were. So then I had to go in and wake my parents up and tell them the news. The whole time during the phone call, I'd already started to get dressed. And I was just thinking, how am I going to go and tell them, like, this news, how to do that? And I just went in and I was like, we need to get up. Daisy's really poorly and she needs us with her. So we got up, we drove to the specialists, which was about just over 25 minutes away. And as we pulled into the car park, there was a car in front of us, and it was the neurology specialist herself. We asked if there was an update, and she said she was in a similar place. She wanted to get in and check on her herself before she allowed us to go in. So she came back in and she said that they were ready for us to see Daisy, but she warned us that Daisy was in a really bad way and it wasn't going to be nice to see her. We asked if Daisy would know if we were there, and she said she wasn't sure because Daisy's eyes were not responding at all. But as soon as we got to her, we knew that she could hear us at least. She was lying in her little pen, and she was like hooked up to all different machines. She had oxygen on, and her breathing was really bad. As soon as we sat down next to her and we were like, Daisy, we're here, she started to try and move. It was making her really agitated, but she was trying to get up. So even though Daisy's brain wasn't working and she couldn't see anything, her eyes weren't responding, she could still hear us and she still knew we were there. As soon as they took that oxygen away from her, she was in a terrible state. She was kind of still almost in a seizure. And seeing her like that was just absolutely heartbreaking. So then we had to speak to the specialist and see what our options were. So she explained to us that the treatment wasn't working for Daisy. She wasn't responding to it, and at that point she didn't know why. The people that might be able to help were not available at that time. But she didn't know why Daisy wasn't responding. So she said they could put her on steroids, which would be used to treat the inflammation rather than the infection. But if that was the wrong treatment, which she didn't know at the time, then it would have just shut Daisy's body down. The other alternative, which would have been the chemotherapy, she said takes 5 days to get into her system and work. And if you would have seen her in that state, there was no way she could have lasted another, we couldn't do it for another 5 minutes, never mind 5 days. I think it's really hard for vets in this situation because they can't give you the advice that you want because they simply don't know the answers. But what she did say is, if I would have asked her what her plan was in the car, it would have been completely different from when she got there and saw Daisy. She said on her way there in the car, her plan was to treat her, to change the treatment and to see how she responded. But she said at that point, there was no response in Daisy's eyes. So in her opinion, if Daisy would have pulled through with the treatment change, Daisy's brain was already damaged and she wouldn't be able to survive like that. So then I asked her the question. I was like, what would you do as a vet? What would be the best decision? But also separately as a pet owner, what would you do? And her response was, it's very difficult because as a vet, we have to do everything that we can to save a dog, no matter what. But as a pet owner, it's quite cruel. She said if my dog was in this position, there'd be no way I would perform CPR on them when they're this vulnerable. She did also say if it was something else, which she thought it could have been, I can't remember what it was, then she's never treated a dog that survived that before. And that's other dogs, other dog breeds. You know, Daisy's a very small French bulldog, so the odds were against her already. In her opinion, she said they could continue treating her, but she didn't think that she was going to make it past a couple of hours, and she was going to be in this really distressed state for the whole time. So at that point, we made the easiest but also the hardest decision to put her to sleep. They brought Daisy out of her little pen and put it onto like a little rug on the floor in front of us. And she just explained that it's basically an overdose of anaesthetic, but she did warn us that Daisy might not just go to sleep as she should because of how poorly her brain was. She might have make a lot of noises and a lot of movement. But we had Daisy on the floor in front of us, and she was literally, it was heartbreaking because at this point she didn't have the oxygen on, so she was struggling to breathe. Her body was just wriggling around everywhere, and she just put the anaesthetic in, and within seconds her body she just went into a relaxed state. We were all cuddling her, and she just went really peacefully. So from when we got into see Daisy at about 10 to 3, she passed away at 3:05, so it was just 15 minutes, but it was the worst 15 minutes I've ever seen her in that state. Then we were given time with her to go and spend in a separate quiet room away from the ICU centre. And we spent like over an hour with her, probably near 2 hours there with her. And the team were honestly like amazing. They explained everything to us. They explained what our options were going forward, with what we were going to do with Daisy. They'd done a paw print for us. They shaved some of her hair for us to take home. My brother also came and spent an hour there with us. And then just after 5 a.m, we handed Daisy back to them and we went home. Now at this point, obviously, they didn't have the final result. They weren't 100% sure on what was wrong with Daisy. So we got that information a couple of days later. So after Daisy had passed on the Sunday morning, I think it was the Monday afternoon, we got a call from the specialist. She'd had the results back and it was exactly what she thought it was. It was an infection that had travelled from her ear into her brain. Now she said usually an infection will grow out rather than in. And this is why we'd not noticed any signs of an infection. It hadn't caused Daisy any problems because it had gone in rather than out. She said this is very uncommon, and I know a lot of people were really concerned because their dogs have ear infections a lot, but this was something that was really uncommon. So please, don't be too worried that this is something that's going to happen to your dog, because it shouldn't have happened. So the treatment plan, which what they went with, was what they should have gone with. She said there's a couple of reasons why it didn't work for Daisy. The first being that they just didn't get to it quick enough. But she did say when Daisy started having the symptoms and we took her to the vet, they did everything in the right way. Because if you take your dog to a vet with an ear infection with those symptoms, then it wouldn't be the best practice to straight away send them for an MRI or a CT scan. They can't possibly send every dog for an MRI or a CT scan when they go in with an ear infection. As I say, this is very uncommon. And I think if they would have said, let's take it for an MRI scan now, we would have gone, let's try with the antibiotics first. We didn't want her to go under general anaesthetic if she didn't need to. The second reason was that the antibiotic wasn't specific enough, but because they couldn't get the fluid from Daisy's spine and brain, they were unable to give a specific one and had to use a broad spectrum antibiotic. And the third is that the antibiotic dose was too high for Daisy's body to cope with, but they had to give it at that dose because of how bad the infection was in her brain. Anything less wouldn't have done anything, so it had to be all or nothing. In her opinion, she thought it was the first and it wasn't, we didn't get to it soon enough. But as I say, she said the vet had followed all the right steps and done everything. And even if we would have got it in sooner, she doesn't know whether she still would have survived it because of the strength of the antibiotic that they needed and the placement of the infection in the brain. She said if it was at the base of her brain, she would have opened Daisy up and been able to scoop the infection right out. But the abscess was further up, so she couldn't get to it via surgery. It was near too many very important parts of her brain, and the abscess was absolutely huge. So unfortunately for our Daisy, it was just really bad luck. Bad luck in the sense of, that doesn't happen often with ear infections. Ear infections usually come out of the ear rather than in that far, for sure anyway. And her little body just wasn't strong enough to cope with the treatment. I think the worst part for us is that she was so happy, and apart from her allergies, she had no other health problems. If she'd suffered with something for a long time, it might have been a little bit easier, but I don't know. I was torturing myself because I was her last few days before she went in, she was really poorly and really unhappy. And I thought I would have felt better if she went in and she would have had a really nice few days. But then somebody had said to me that they took their dog in for surgery and they were really happy when they went in and their dog passed away and they felt guilty about that. So I don't think there's any kind of scenario where you would feel better. For anybody who's been through it, they know it's the hardest thing. I've never been through it before, and it is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I don't think I'll ever get over it, but equally I don't want to. What I would like to ask is that there's no negativity in the comments towards the vets or anything that we did for her, because this has happened. I'm putting these posts out for awareness, so other dog owners know what we've been through and know what to look out for in the future. And also, can I please ask for people not to put suggestions of what we should have done in the comments, because equally, it's too late now. There's nothing we could have done, and all this kind of stuff been going through our heads for the last week. And it's just a very unfortunate situation. We did everything that we could, we thought was right, and equally the vets did the same. And the neurology team in Northwest Specialists were absolutely amazing. And I will 100%, if Bertie ever needs to go back to see a neurologist, we'll be taking him there. I'm really happy with the care they provided, and they did absolutely everything they could.